Hi, welcome to this edition of the Inside Black Iowa podcast. I'm Dana James and the host, and I am also the founder and publisher of Black Iowa News. Today we have some guests from the farming community who are going to talk about their family's history. So I'd like to welcome Todd Western and his mother, Barbara Western.
Hello, how
Thanks
are
for
you?
coming on.
Good
Great. How are
morning.
you all
Good
today?
morning. All
Good
right.
morning.
Good. So I wanted to have you come on. I got to meet you, Todd, a little bit at the conference that you had last fall in Des Moines, innovative, well attended conference. But I wanted to introduce you to our audience to talk a little bit more about your family's history in farming and what that has meant.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to do this with my mom. Now she can brag to her friends that she's doing her first podcast.
Yeah, my youngest son went to Grandview.
Oh,
Yeah, I think. Let's see. I think this got to go wrong. Um,
Down on a basketball scholarship.
and eventually it was acting too, right? Acting
Yes.
scholar.
Well,
Yeah.
the typical thing when he got there.
well, I agree. Walk us through a little bit of your family's history. How do we get to the point where you're, leading up this national Black Farmers Conference in Iowa?
It's a long, rich history that we're all proud about. And so I like to put it in chapters because there is so much history. So chapter one, is basically how it all began. So in about 1790 in Abington, Virginia, one of the original Westerns was enslaved in Abington, Virginia. He bought his way out of slavery for $700. And then once he bought his way out of slavery, he went to work for his slave master's son, who was a little bit nicer than he was, and went and worked for him, saved up enough money, and a year or two later, he went and bought his wife and children out of slavery. And so he gets his wife and children out of slavery. He had three children. One actually died within the first 6 months of being free of a disease that they could have been cured of today. So now they load up the wagon and they make their way west. Not sure why. I'm sure, at that time, the prosperity was in the west. So they load up their wagon. They travel through Ohio. And in Ohio, some of the Westerns, didn't trust the system. So they went to Canada and an arrest came to Iowa. They settled in Iowa. Not sure why they settled in Iowa, but obviously it was a good decision. So they settled in Iowa and they bought their first land in 1864. And so they bought an 80-acre tract in 1864, and by 1886 they bought the second 80 acres, and so that combined for 160 acres. So the start of the Western farming tradition started in 1864, and at that time, there was the father, the sister, the uncle that also had farms as well. So between all the Westerns at that time, between Ewart and New Sharon and Oskaloosa, we had about 1,500 acres between all the Westerns at one time. And so that's how it all began. And so, everything was great. And so, chapter three, I call the next 110 years. They operate as a normal farming family. They were blessed by God that they weren't significantly messed with. They were well respected in the community. Obviously, probably had your issues at the time, but they were well respected. They helped their neighbors, and neighbors helped them. And so for the next 110 years, they operate as a normal family. The key to that success, obviously, is faith, family, pride, sprinkled with some luck. And so the foundation was built. Then you enter, chapter four is 1974 to 2008. That's when my recollection of the farm comes in, where my grandfather Todd won. He's him and his wife Grace are running the farm with their three daughters and son. Charlene Montgomery, Betty Cook, and Joyce Cook, Betty Smith, Joyce Cook, and my dad Todd II. And so from that they really established a farm, and they ate everything they raised. They raised everything they ate: chickens, cows, pigs, the whole works, and they farmed the acres. And then then I like to say, family with this type of tradition, the baton is handed. And so in 1974, the baton was handed to my father because my grandfather passed away from lung cancer in 1974. So by that time, the interesting part of the story is leading up to 1974, you look at my mom and dad, who I like to call super parents. They moved to Waterloo in 1966. My dad becomes the first Black supervisor at John Deere. And so we are raised. Me and my brothers were raised by parents that were pioneers in their own right and did a lot of first. My dad was the first black supervisor at John Deere. My mom was the first black cheerleader provider east in Chicago, Illinois. She was an opera singer. She won all kinds of scholarships to sing out in New York. And so growing up, I always tell people we could either be in farm clothes, church clothes, school clothes, or going to an opera house. And so we had a
Nice.
very, very expanded childhood and background, and that's why I appreciate that. And so, from so then when my grandfather passed away, my father, he took on that task of saying, you know what, I'm going to farm both farms because he had also bought a farm in Waterloo of 40 acres. So he's full time at John Deere. My mom was full time school teacher, plus singing on the weekends, raising two boys at the time. And so now he said, let's add some more to that. Let's try to farm the farm 2 hours away in New Sharon, Iowa. So we would load up the semi and we'd take all our tractors and equipment down there, farm that, and then come back, go to work, and then farm the 40 acres up here. So that went on for about 4 to 6 years, and until it got to be a little bit much. And so at that point, we rented out the farm down in New Sharon, and we farmed the 40 acres here in Waterloo. So during that time, like I said, my parents are doing everything under the sun, and my father, he started running the Chicago marathons. And so he's training for the Chicago Marathon every year in October. And so, we had to get the crops done so we get to Chicago to run the Chicago Marathon. In between us running to opera houses to hear my mom sing opera. So, and then, so everything's going well. And so that baton is handed off to us. And then during that time from, between, I'd say 80 and 2008, my dad, he continued his education. My mom gets her doctorate. And so now, we're full fledged busy, and I go off to college. I graduate, move to Minneapolis. My brother's in college, and then unfortunately, chapter 5 is a dark but bright spot in our family history. The patriarch of our family, the Mister He can do everything, unfortunately passes away in a bicycle accident. He
Mm.
was training for his 13th marathon,
18.
18th marathon,
Wow.
uh, and he had an unfortunate bicycle accident. And so in 2008, he passed away. And so that's when really the family came together and really, really bonded, because I'd never forget, me and my brother were after the funeral, because you're so in shock and awe. Me and my mom and brothers, we realized, like, oh crap, there's a crop in the field, because he died in July, and
Oh,
he had planted it in April. So we realized, holy crap, there's a crop in the field that we got to get out. So at that point, we had to band together, say, okay, where did he put this? Where's the keys for that? What do we do here? And so fortunately, my brother Chris, he's very mechanical, and that's really what was part of our success, is that he knew how to fix things. And so me and my mom handled kind of the business side and the program side. And so from 2008 to 2015, we did exactly what dad did. We just farmed it the exact way he did. And so, by that time, my mom was retired. So right around 2014, 2015, we realized, I'm coming back and forth from Minneapolis. This was 3.5 hours. I got a family. My brother has a family, and my baby brother, he's just starting his career. And so we realized we got to make this farm a little bit more efficient, more effective, so that way we get more bang for a buck. So my mom, now enter mom, we call her the CEO, Dr. Western. She enters the frame, and she's from city girl from Chicago, and so she jumps in, and I'm gonna let her take over here, but she jumps in, and she's a very spiritual person. So her and God, made a pact, and they say, okay, God, help guide me through this. And so she then engages a new process of getting us into cost share programs, cost savings, and things of that nature. But I'll let her talk about her journey into that. So she really had to dive into agriculture and learn agriculture, city girl from Chicago. So from
before
there,
before we
so
go there, I want to
yeah,
go back to, I think it's one of the things that's fascinating too is that during the time that your family would have purchased these farms in Iowa, that's right around Juneteenth essentially. That's right around the time that the
right,
message
right,
gets to Galveston, the last
right, right,
formerly enslaved people find out that they're
right.
free. Like it's a, you know,
Right. So if you think about it, 1864, in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed,
right.
right? And then in 1865, the Civil War ended. So all this accomplishment and success was in spite of a lot of the things that were going on in the world. And so, like I say, faith and family guided us through that. But there was a lot going on in that time period of 1864.
I wonder too, like when you were talking about kind of the different chapters, Have you kept a lot of records within the family of,
Mhm.
you
Yep.
know, what kind of records
Yep.
do you
So
have?
the good news is that me and my mom, we're like history buffs. We capture at every moment with picture. We got letters from everything. So me and my mom, that's what we do. We really enjoy capturing history and saving it and things of that nature. So my mom, she went to. You want to tell me about the genealogical book when you got the book made of the farm?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, like he says, the Lord just started leading me because and it was just like it was my put upon me to do. And somehow I ran into this young man that worked for a State Department, and I met him in Iowa City, and he came up with a whole book, a history of the Western family in Iowa, and who were helped here to settle here through the Underground Railroad, which Iowa was one of the well-known states for that, the Underground Railroad. So my point is, things had to be tended to, and I drove down to the farm agency, and God just sent nice people, nice people to welcome me and to let me know. And then I would invite the boys to come down so they could listen. And and that's how I started. Without without their help, I would have been really lost.
What
But
were you
anyway,
thinking when you were going down there, Dr. Weston? When you were going to the farm agency, what were you wanting to accomplish?
as to what programs were available and what shape our farmland was in and what shape was the soil in and how was the renter reporting and what was my responsibility in keeping track of what he was reporting from the yield on the land. And so that took me through steps. And um, and I brought the boys down so they could listen to what this man had to say, and found out that. So later on, I had to have the soil evaluated, pay $1,000 and something for that, and just recently I got a government program to take care of the floodage,
Waterways.
the waterways on the land, the waterways that the renter was complaining about. And then you look into the renters. Um, I I never thought you would have problem with your renters, but you do. You have to watch the renters, and found out he wasn't doing things that he should have done. Like when the ancestors moved in, they had to buy a land with timber on it so they could build houses. Well, the timber over the years grew up with walnut trees, and he had he had come in and harvested some of my walnut trees. Like they're $300 a piece now, and the and to get to the timber, you had to go through another farmer's land. So you had to have permission to go through the land to get to your timber. Oh,
So can you imagine, like, you just learn this on the fly, like it's not as easy as it is. So like I said, she was blessed that she had the temperament and the patience to navigate the system, and people were put in front of her that helped to navigate the system. And
yeah,
so at the end of the day, like I said, she learned about renters' rights and tenants' rights. She learned about cost savings program, which today I'm happy to report that we are running very, very lean, effective, and efficient because of the programs that she reached out to. And so the industry agencies, the state agencies know her now. So when she walks in now, she has a little bit of respect now where they take care of her. But it took some doing. But we're here now. So that's the great news.
and here my husband then bought the land, some land up here, the 40 acres, because he's a farm boy and he didn't like not having it. Used to be the old Rath packing company where they kept their pigs and things. But the point is, I found out that there are a couple of minority farmers here, And when my husband died one year and the boys couldn't get to farm it, I asked this one minority farmer in the neighbor, and he came in and leased it for that growing period. He had no idea of some of the programs that were available to minorities at all. So by me talking to him, he said, Miss Western, I didn't know. So I feel good about that. So he's gotten into looking into programs for minorities too, you know.
which is a great thing about, we don't we try to, which is why our Iowa Farmers of Color conference happened, is that we were doing it just on a small scale, whoever we could speak to, especially minority farmers, letting them know that, hey, here's some of the successes we've had, here's some of the challenges we had, take the information as you will. So we just try to create our own community.
Yeah,
Now,
and
when
again,
before
Go ahead.
your husband had passed away, was there very much interaction with other like black farmers around, or was
no,
pretty much you're doing
No,
your own thing and
with our own
because you
thing.
got to remember, in 1944, 14% of the farmer population was black. Today, it's less than 1.4%. And in the state of Iowa, according to the census in 2017, there was only 5 black farms that owned or operated 100 or more acres. So, and of those 5, the Westerns owned 3. So that leaves
mm,
2 more. So the other one was Mike Cook, who was our neighbor. So that's the only other black farmer we really knew
okay.
growing up, was Mike Cook, and so we just trade information with him and support each other. He'd help us a lot, and he helped us a lot too when my father
But
passed.
he didn't know about those programs that I had was running into, and I was glad to share it with you. Yeah, because
Right.
his dad.
That's tremendous. I
Yeah,
mean, I think the more we, like you're saying, the more we delve into our history in the state in particular, the more amazing gold nuggets fall out of the sky about
mhm.
all these great accomplishments that our people had that we know nothing about. And that's
Yeah.
why I love, I'm so glad you're here to talk today.
And then
So,
there's a family that came from Oklahoma years ago, a black family, and they had the privilege of getting some of the money from oil there. And they came here and they bought some farmland down by Independence, Iowa.
okay.
But they never went any further to develop it or to talk about it or to get it developed. And they have since lost it, over the generations, had farmland down there, but through the fighting between family members and blah, 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 it never got developed and, you know, and to stand up for a black farmer.
And I
But
think it's, the other thing too, it's a different time, because I don't know that my father and his generation would have had these kind of conversations, because, back then, you kept everything to yourself. You didn't really broadcast it, where times have changed now. And so the only reason I'm really talking to you is because I try to tell my story. So my background is in corporate sales. And so when you're selling something, you need to tell your story, right? So once I told my story to one person and spread to the next person, here we are today, where now we're talking about not only the Western farm, and again, we just were handed the baton. We didn't build this. We're just taking our like in a relay race. We're taking our section and trying to maximize the time that we have our section, and setting up the next runner with the baton, which is my son and his grandkids, to take it from there. So Joyce, Charlene, my dad, Betty, they did a great job with their section. Now it's been handed to us, so I'm trying to elevate it again, and then for that next generation.
and because the black female has kind of been set free a little bit more, I was able to navigate and go down and talk to people and get the respect from these people that gave me information. But back in the day, I don't think
Mm-mm,
so.
mm.
That it would not have happened. So
It
I,
barely
I'm
happened for
great.
the black males,
Yeah,
let alone black
Right.
females.
Amen. Amen that. Amen to
yeah.
that. That's beautiful. What did you draw upon to say, you know what, we're going to make this even better than it was before?
Well, just the fact that we appreciated owning land. We appreciated owning the land and appreciated the work that my husband's family put into it. And I, growing up in Chicago, we lived in an apartment in the north side of Chicago. But my family, every Friday, they put the money on the table and saved money, and we moved to Maywood, Illinois. But the house was precious. It was just to own something
Amen.
precious. And that at that time that we could all in Maywood, black people could only go to the skating rink once a week and to bowling alley once a week. And we had this little lady across the street. She was our Martin Luther King. She got it so we could go. So I appreciated every advantage black people got. And so here we are at Granddad's farm, and the Western they were respected in the neighborhood, and keep it going, and that's what we want to do. And my son has taken the lead on that. I appreciate it. And my second son's a mechanic on the job, and my third son, he hasn't discovered what his talents are relating to the farm yet, but I hope he does. Right now, he's in the communication and stuff. But I look on the heavens as a Todd. We're keeping it going in your name. In your name.
Yeah.
Yep.
And because the one thing an old black farmer told me down south one time is like, keep your land because they don't make any more of it. They don't make any more. So whether you have 1 acre or 1,000 acres, it's still precious. And
Yeah.
especially in the backdrop of the fact that black farmers only account for 1.4% of the farms today, it's very, very valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hear down south. Uh, I heard that some of the farms are trying to be taken over. They're stealing the titles to some of the black farmers' land down there. It's somewhere in Georgia, maybe, or
All over.
Mississippi. Yeah, they're trying to take their land. Take their land.
well, it's
So,
it's beautiful that your family has been able to hold on to it, and now you're, like you said, maximizing it. So how did you get to the point where you thought, hey, I'm going to have a national conference and get all of these high level governmental officials to come to Des Moines of all places and pack this winery to talk about farming?
Man, that's a like the story we just told of our Western farm. This is a whole nother story, and it all comes down to telling your story and telling about your legacy. So, so like I said, I'm an extrovert in my family, and so I do sales, corporate sales, and so I tell our story a lot, right? And so, it got picked up by the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Got picked up by the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and once that happened, we kind of, Aaron Jordan at Cedar Rapids Gazette was very, very gracious and did a great story on us. They followed us for an entire year from February to November, and watched us farm for an entire year. And so once that story broke, simultaneously, PJ Haney, who is a huge farmer, he farms 10,000 acres between Virginia and Arkansas. And so he he was in a conference in Arizona, and he was given a conference, and he met this white lady from Iowa. And so he said, not knowing me, he said, "Hey, by the way, do you know if there's any black farmers in Iowa?" She said, "I do not know if there's any black farmers in Iowa," and they left it alone. So 2 weeks later, the story breaks to Cedar Gazette, and then she sees it. She calls him and said, "Hey, I found a black farmer in Iowa." So then PJ calls me, and then I meet him. I had no idea, because remember, I only knew one other black farmer, and that was Mike Cook. And so we all own 100, 200 acres. That's about it. He farms 10,000 acres. So it blew my mind that it was that to that level. And he also is the first black owned, he runs the first only black owned rice mill in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Him and
Wow.
Billy Bridgeforth. So Billy Bridgeforth and PJ Haney operate it's called Arkansas River Rice. And so from there, PJ introduces me to the Southern black farmers. And then I go down to what's called the Harvest Ball in North Carolina. And then I can tell you that I always tell people, it's like if a Jewish person went to Israel, or a Muslim went to Mecca, or a kid went to Disneyland, that's what it was like to me. So you get down there. Keep in mind, I only know one other black farmer. I go down there. It's a 3-day conference with a black tie event on Saturday night. It's 400 black successful farmers in one room,
whoa.
and they farm everything you can think of, from blueberries to corn and soybeans, and they farm 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 acres. And so they're looking at me like I'm an anomaly. I'm looking at them because they're like, first of all, I didn't know there was any black people in Iowa. Second of all, I didn't know any black people farmed in Iowa. So from there, we created this kinship. So I went to the second annual Harvest Ball. And then after that, I said, you know what? I need to do the same thing, because the camaraderie, the networking, the closeness that they had down there. I said, how hard can it be? I think there's only 10 of us up here anyway. So I need to do the same thing here. So I came back, and once again, God put angels in front of me and I put it together in 6 months. And shout out to Practical Farmers of Iowa who helped me facilitate this. Rachel Burke and Liz Colby of Practical Farmers of Iowa, they really helped us navigate this. So we put it on with the idea of my whole thing was just find them. I wanted to find the 7 Black farmers because they asked me, well, how many people are going to come? I said about 20, 25. Well, it turns out we wound up with 116 Black farmers in one room. They farmed everything from worms to lavender to corn and soybeans to cows, you name it, they farmed it, and we brought them all together. And the number one thing was networking and creating a community. Number 2, sharing information. And number 3, keeping that keeping our contacts alive, not just for that one event, but forever, right? So now we can create a community like they do down south. It was so successful that I got a call from the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack,
Our former
who came,
governor.
former governor, who came out and met with me and my team just to see what the hubbub was about, right? And so we sat down and met. He was very proud that we did it. We're hoping that he comes back again this year. And but yeah, so how I knew it was a good thing is that I was talking to an old elderly Black lady after the end of the thing, and I asked her, so how did you enjoy it? And she said, baby, this was food for the soul. So once she told me that, I knew I'd done right. Now, truth be told, I thought this was going to be a one and done, and the people said, no, this has got to be every year. So,
Right.
so we are doing it again. Our second annual will be November 16th. November 16th, Saturday in Des Moines. The more details are coming out. And then in the meantime, so that we don't just have to wait until to the end of the year, we're trying to meet on a quarterly basis via Zoom. And then we're having a outdoor event, a barbecue on Sunday, August 4th from noon to 3 at Minerva's in my Meadow Farm over in State Center. So
Okay.
so we're encouraging all the Black farmers to come out again and supporters of Black farmers to come out to the Iowa Farmers of Color Cookout on August 4th, Sunday.
Okay. So were all of those farmers, were they from Iowa, or did you have any people
So
come from any border
we
states?
had we had people from the Kansas Black Farmers Association, Dr. Janella Holmes from Kansas. We had Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Illinois, and then one brother came up from Georgia. So we had it all. So our goal is to this year we doubled the room this year. So now we're expecting at least 250 people this year. And so we're really expanding it. And so again, Dr. Dwayne Goldman, who is the senior director of racial equity for the USDA, will be there.
Okay.
And then one of our keynote speakers is Denise Greer Jamerson. She actually owns a farm in Indiana longer than ours. Hers started before the Civil War.
Indiana.
Yeah, Indiana. And so she's come to be one of our speakers. She's actually in the Smithsonian. She's in the Smithsonian for her farm. And so she's going to come and give some context to, being a Black farmer. She also puts on her own conference in Indiana. And so she's going to talk about the successes and challenges that they go through in Indiana. And so we can learn from each other.
What's your thoughts on what difference does it make being a Black farmer? What are the challenges inherent
Oh,
with being a Black farmer?
well, historically, and this is when my son Todd the Fourth, I didn't really know about it. Like I said, we're farmers. Farmers in general are a small community, but then you get to be a Black farmer, you're pretty much in a silo, right? And so in our silo it was just us and Mike Cook, right? And so we just trade. But then what happens is when my son starts sending me these videos of the plight of Black farmer, that's really when I really took a notice of the value of us having a farm, because what happens is Black farmers will get bad business deals. The banks will foreclose easily on those bad business deals. And then the other thing is there's no succession plan. So Black farmers, with any business, but Black farmers have no succession plan. So once mom or dad dies, there's nothing in the paperwork that says who's going to take it over, where this is, where that is, how to manage the farm going forward. So then therefore now you got taxes, you got this and that coming up, and so then the farm goes away. And so just and then the other thing too is you're excluded from a lot of things. For example, you know, I don't know if you heard or not, but at the last conference we were at, you know, Mike Cook recited the fact that he wanted to buy some land. And then once they realized that he was for real and he had cash on hand to buy it, they reconfigured the deal so that they priced it out of his range so he could not get it. Or the second example is you could be a neighbor with a white family that you know they want to get out of farming, and you have a good relationship with them. This is what was cited to me down south, and they said, you know what, when we want to sell this, we're probably going to sell it to you. But then once a realtor hears about it, the realtor then tells his network and say, hey, you know, Mama Jones is going to sell a property, but this black farmer is trying to buy it, so we need to get together. And so then they get together, they create this high price, all that black farmer who lives right next door and has had a good relationship with that white farmer, that they don't get it. That happens all the time. So real estate that comes on the market doesn't necessarily go public right away. By the time it goes public, it's too late. So therefore, that uh, hampers our ability to grow.
It's a structure that they don't have the history in to be able to understand like what you just described what's going on with it. So
Right.
that's so amazing that it's such a resource, and I'm sure that it's helping preserve the black farms that we have in Iowa, and maybe even the creation of some future ones.
Right.
Mhm.
And I know, my mom has always preached to us about, having your paperwork tight and right. And so, so the paperwork, she's always telling us, here's what this is, here's what that is. So we know where everything is. And so if anything were ever to happen, we don't have to start from square one. Right. And so there's certain things that we have to do as black people, whether it's you just own a house and a car or whether you own farm, we've got to get our paperwork in order so that the next generation can take it from there. Because, there's so many sad stories of people from down south, that have bigger families, 8 kids, 10 kids, 12 kids. But if the directive of the father's wish or the mother's wishes is not passed down to say, this is what I want done with this farm. Here's the paperwork. Here's who's in charge. And the number one thing that I think a lot of black farmers go away from is the property taxes. It may be paid for, but if you got 8 kids, nobody wants to pay the property tax, then all of a sudden it mounts up and everybody is not on the same page, then it goes away, right? Because not if you get 4 or 5 kids, not everybody's going to agree. One person is going to be into farming, the other kid's not going to be into farming, but yet he wants the money and blah blah. So things get messed up. We got to get our paperwork right and tight, and you gotta talk about the succession plan consistently so everybody's on the same page.
Thing we had fortunate is that the Western family had this lawyer who was an ex serviceman, very nice. When and he can remember crawling around in his office. But the point is, he was a very nice man, very thorough man. And all the records there were there of the farm and wills and everything, and just all there to take over, for me.
That's
Uh,
beautiful.
and then I went and spent hours at the courthouse in the old books, and I found where these people had come, and yeah, and just one more book I've got to get down there and look at. I didn't do, but it was really great looking up. But my point is, finding a good lawyer is the trick. And then when I replaced this lawyer, when he retired, I haven't found a good one yet. I hope so. I hope so.
She brings up a great point is that, part of the, farming is stressful enough, but black farmers have the extra added stress of, like she just mentioned, she was blessed with the original lawyer who was a friend of the family, who was, we like to say, God put that angel in front of us. But there's a lot of stress of when you walk in to meet somebody, where are they coming from? Are they coming from a good space, or are
Right.
they coming from a space of, why do you have this? You should just sell it. So my mom would have to go through layers of, I don't want to sell it. I'm going to keep it in the family. We're here to stay. So that's the first 20 minutes of a conversation. Then we get to the business. Well, by that time, you're already ticked off and you got to use a lot of, so it takes a lot to have those conversations because I always tell people as a black farmer, when you meet white farmers in the community, some of the time you justify instead of saying, "Hey Joe, how you doing? Do you have some seed or what do you do about this? What do you do about that?" They say, "Oh, you have a farm?" Then you go through just fine. Well, do you own the farm? Do you own the equipment? Well, how did you get that? So in that meeting, you're justifying how you got the farm. And that's a lot of stress. And people underestimate that. People say, well, what's the big deal now? No, when we can go anywhere and they'll say, well, how do you own the farm? Well, how do you own the farm? But my response to them, so my mom sometimes they catch on a bad day, it doesn't go well. But I like to have fun with it. I like to have fun with that. Say my first response is they'll say, well, we don't see very many black farmers. I said, really? And I said, well, who do you think built the South? I said, I don't know. I don't know if you know about the cotton gin or the peanut or these other processes
Yeah,
that we had to invent
yeah.
so it was better for us. It wasn't we did it for them to be more profitable. We did it for us so we didn't have to break our back. So I would say, and they most of them look at me like, oh, you're right. I apologize for that question.
Yeah, get them. I love it. I love it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, he mentioned you were an opera singer.
Yes.
So tell me about your career singing opera.
Well, it started. Mom and dad loved to go to Goodwill back in the day on Saturday mornings, and for some reason, I picked up this '78 record of orchestra music, and it started then for me, and I started playing the record, and then when we moved to Maywood, my mom we would go into Chicago for voice lessons, my sister and I, but being in a black Baptist church, they liked my sister's voice better because she was the mezzo and I was just the lyric soprano. They like that heavy voice. But we would go for voice lessons and piano lessons. And then when I graduated high school, I thought, well, I want to go into music, but I gotta either teach music so I could make money. Anyway, I get to Iowa, and I went to start at college here, and
Okay.
University of Northern Iowa, and and then I auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera audition, and I got it. I won it. I got it, but I was a year too old. I was too old. They didn't check the age. There was an age limit, and I
Ah,
couldn't. I couldn't. So Mr. Fisher, he was a millionaire in Marshalltown. I don't know if you remember him.
mm-mm.
He gave me the scholarship anyway, and I went to New York with that scholarship, and I was taking lessons at the Metropolitan, and the lady, and then I got sent across town to a teacher, and she every time I went, she would say, "Are you sure you're not Spanish?" And yes, I'm not Spanish. And my dad taught us you don't give up your self respect to nobody.
I love
If
it.
you have to change jobs 100 times, you don't do it. And I said, no, I'm not Spanish. She's saying, if you weren't black, we could just help you. Yeah. So that's what I was up against there. But then I got into an off Broadway play and went back again. So I went back. My husband was so gracious to let me go 3 times, and even took the boys to New York with me. Yeah. But anyway, so I came back here and did a lot of singing, particularly at the university. They wouldn't let me in operas at the University of Iowa. They always had an excuse, but they went around and I always got to sing with the orchestra. Then I was in a musical. Not a, well, yeah, but there was always someone at the school who said, "Well, we got to get her to sing." But the opera people would not let me in. And what's that black tenor's name?
Roberson.
Robeson. This black singer was down there at University of Iowa. He couldn't stay in the dorms and blah blah blah. Back in the 40s or 50s. What's his name? But anyway, A teacher came from New York, Juilliard, to teach at Iowa for a year. Now, they wouldn't let this man in any operas or anything. When he left, he took this singer with him,
Mm,
became famous.
wow.
That's how close Iowa was, became famous. So I did get opportunities to sing. Even here at the University of Northern Iowa, they wouldn't let me in opera. Uh, but the head of the department saw that I got to sing with the orchestra, stuff like that. Yeah,
Do you sing
yeah.
much anymore?
Since my husband died, I'm a, no.
We need
Get
to get
busy
her
with the
there.
farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No excuse. She can do it. She did it once before. She can do it again.
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sure. I'm sure
yeah.
she could do anything. The one of the things too, as we wrap up about your farm, there's a label that's attached because it's
160.
160. Is it a heritage farm?
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
Talk about what that means.
Well, it's been in the family for that long, and you go to state fair and we see a plaque saying this has been in the Western family for 100 something years. And
So they honor it at 50, 100, and 150.
Okay. Wow, what a distinction. When was that you went to the fair to get that award?
oh, what, 4 years ago?
Well, I mean, that was a journey as well. In addition to my mom, delving into this, that's when she found out that, hey,
Yeah,
you guys are about 6 years late on our
yeah,
150, because
yeah,
we got 150 at 156 years.
yeah.
So they were a little late on that one. So, luckily, my mom with her tenacity, she's always,
On the
knocking on
phone,
on
on
the
the
phone,
phone.
knocking on, don't forget us. So, we went down there, and it's a long day, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And
They call you up front. You
yeah,
take pictures with the
yeah,
secretary of
yeah,
agriculture, and
yeah,
with yeah, for
yeah,
all the
yeah.
farms. Yeah.
And it's good. It was just good to be. I mean, you're really the only black
Recognized.
farmer there. The two times I was there, I went there for the 100 and 150. We were the only black farmers there. But I know that there's other black farmers that have owned it for 100. So you may just Boldridge. He owned a farm in the Fort Dodge area, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to find him. And
Yeah.
he owns some land in Fort Dodge, and I think he retired in Des Moines. So I'm trying to get contact with him because I'm pretty sure he's had his farm, and
Baldridge.
I never seen him at any of these events, but I'm trying to get a hold of him.
And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot more of that as you go on, this coming together
Yeah,
and everything. I love that. And I love that you have these quarterly meetings and cookouts and things to really have that network and that community that was there kind of invisibly, but you brought them all out.
Yes,
yeah,
he did.
yeah.
I'm so proud of him doing this. Yeah, I am. But
Awesome.
as you see, he's got the talent for it. He's
I
got the
know.
talent.
He needs
He's
to
got
come
the talent.
he needs to come work with Black Iowa News with and bring those superior sales skills and help me out with that. So, but yeah, that's so awesome. Is there anything else that you want people listening to this podcast to know about you or your family that we didn't talk about today?
I would just say for me, we didn't do this alone. We stand on the backs of our ancestors, and most recently in my recollection, my dad, my three aunts, my grandfather, and then the other Westerns in that area, the Kiners, we just, they had their baton, the baton's been handed to us, and we're just trying to continue the legacy of the Western farm and uplift it. And then number two, while we're up using our platform to bring together other black farmers and create awareness of black farmers so that uh, we all learn the same, we all learn at the same time, and that we can get access to the different programs and be noticed.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to have you on in the future as you prepare for that next conference. And I want to thank everybody listening to the Inside Black Iowa podcast. You can find it where good podcasts exist: Spotify, Substack, YouTube. And also, Black Iowa News is now able to accept tax deductible donations. So help out the state's only Black newspaper.
Okay.
Again, thank you for listening and have a great day.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate what you're doing too.